What if the Fire Nation won the war? ATLA, alternate history. Now, Avatar The Last Airbender is a high IQ show for high IQ people. Compared to what kids watch nowadays, it's pure genius.
I was sad because I was afraid you lost your way.
So no surprise that people are still talking about it 12 years after it aired, and it still tops Netflix's top 10 list. I don't know if that's due to a lack of good stuff on Netflix or attest to how good ATLA is, but anyway, I want to talk about a possible alternate history concerning ATLA. This world is rich with geopolitical details, so of course major spoilers ahead. Go watch it on Netflix or some pirating website, I don't care. Ready? Let's go. And I just want to let you know I started a fresh brand new Patreon. Hop on there if you want to buy me a Big Mac and suggest future video ideas. As always with one of my videos, I go into background. As the show draws to an end, we find out that Fire Lord Ozai, who later rebrands himself as Phoenix Lord, wants to commit mass genocide. Isn't this how every kid's show ends? It would appear to the common viewer that the war is, in effect, finished with Fire Nation tanks rolling along the streets of Ba Sing Se, as Katara notes. However, Zuko reveals to the gang that he sat in on a crucial war meeting before the Day of Black Sun, and suggests to Ozai that the Earth Kingdom people had hope when the Fire Nation War Council was discussing how to crush rebellions among the kingdom. Azula, of course, suggests violently burning everything to the ground, and Ozai agrees. He wants to build a new world out of ashes, like a phoenix arises from ashes after burning. Get it? I don't like innocent civilians dying, but hey, when you have rebellions on your hand and you don't have enough men to quell them properly, you have to resort to desperate measures. And so begins the final battle with the Fire Nation. So there are three main theaters of this final battle. Let's explore each one and see what could have changed to ensure a complete Fire Nation victory. So in one theater, Zuko and Katara fly to the capital of the Fire Nation, where Azula is having a psychotic breakdown after her apparent besties Mai and Ty Lee betrayed her at the Boiling Rock prison. Azula's entire worldview was being destroyed due to her utter lack of empathy, so she banishes her servants and most crucially the Dai Li. So Katara and Zuko get to waltz into the capital without any resistance at all before casually dropping into where Azula is about to be crowned Fire Lord. This is mistake numero uno. If the Dai Li were still present and Azula in a sounder state of mind, no doubt more of a fight could have been put up against Zuko and Katara. I'll wager that if Azula were less crazy, she could even defeat Zuko in a one-on-one Agni Kai, although of course, this is speculation. So a brief recap on the whole geopolitical situation of the Fire Nation. After 100 years of war, the Fire Nation has a pretty firm grasp on the Earth Kingdom. Azulon has spent more than 70 years turning the conquered parts of the Earth Kingdom into colonies that wish to remain with the Fire Nation. So when we see the gang travel around the Earth Kingdom, why do we see such a poor presence of a needlessly oppressive Fire Nation regime? The answer is simple. Fire Lord Ozai is an absolute nutter. Being a tad too harsh isn't Ozai's biggest lapse in judgment. We'll talk later about what Ozai literally does on the day of Sozin's comet that solidifies his downfall. Once in 100 years, an event occurs which has the power to change the world. The coming of Sozin's comet at 0 AG allowed the Fire Nation to destroy an entire culture, that of the air nomads. And then, after 100 years of conflict, that power re-emerges. In the cold darkness of eternal space, Sozin's comet arcs once more into the world's presence. Power of the gods will be available to the Firebenders for a fleeting moment, but it will be enough to finish the fight. The Fire Lord, the most powerful nation on the planet, the son of the most capable leader of all time, the quote Phoenix King Ozai, does this. Ozai takes this power of the comet and chooses to use it on a forest, an uninhabited forest save for the poor tree-faring creatures. And what's more, do you know exactly where Wulong Forest is? It's here. It's within freaking Fire Nation territory that his grandfather conquered almost 100 years ago. I'm unsure where Ozai gets celestial information from, but that comet barely hung around long enough for his airships to even clear the forest. What was his plan then? Roll into Ba Sing Se with a few airships, if they even had the capacity to travel that far? A handful of Bender Sans comet power? Just take the place? This is the man who called himself the Phoenix King. If Phoenix is meant to arise from the ashes, Ozai only choked himself with the ashes of Wulong Forest. Simply put, Azula's gift of guaranteed victory was squandered by Ozai within 5 years. It's actually pretty difficult to work out how one man destroy something that took 100 years to make. But hey, this is Ozai we're talking about. No feat of effective stupidity is out of his reach. Azula's policy regarding the colonies was to ensure that they had no reason to desire returning to the Earth Kingdom. Low tax, high benefits, that's all he did. Sprinkle on some propaganda and puppet governments and hey presto, you have an effective colony. In 99 AG, we see dissatisfaction within the colonies. outlaws running amok, and a ineffective Fire Nation presence. All of this is at the hand of Ozai. Perhaps Ozai wished to return to a rule with an iron fist, while he also simultaneously wished that the military be severely undermanned. Or perhaps Ozai had some fool's dream of relinquishing his father's work so that he might do it all again for himself. Or maybe Ozai is just an idiot who has no idea what he's doing, which resulted in a breakdown of all the institutions that held Azula's clan together. So Ozai at this point was losing his grip on the colonies, which could have been prevented by liberalization of policies and screwed up during Sozan's comment. And I'm not the only one that feels this way. People across the internet all wonder why Ozai squandered his only opportunity to demonstrate a show of force against the Earth Kingdom. So in the second theater, Ozai gets defeated by Aang as he goes Super Saiyan in the Avatar state, just barely avoids killing him. Then, the airships meant to torch the land get commandeered by 3 kids. I'm not quite sure why it was so easy for Sokka, Toph, and Suki to hijack the lead airship and then destroy the entire fleet in a matter of minutes. Clearly, they were flying way too close and relied way too much on a centralized command that could be all too easily hijacked by a tiny group of kids. So what has it changed? Well, let's bring the fight out of a random Fire Nation colony forest into the most strategic city in the entire Earth Kingdom, Ba Sing Se. This brings us to the third theater of the war. The liberation of Ba Sing Se from the Fire Nation was one of the final battles of the 100 Years' War. The secretive order of the White Lotus, led by Grand Lotus Iroh, penetrated Ba Sing Se and fought against occupying Fire Nation forces in order to free the city in the name of the Earth Kingdom. The large Fire Nation garrison outnumbered the small order, and the arrival of Sozan's comet increased their power. However, the order consisted of the most powerful benders and fighters in the world, along with a substantial amount of plot armor, including some firebenders of their own. This meant that the order had a considerable tactical advantage, ultimately leading to their victory, or so it led to believe. Upon the comet's arrival, the order laid siege to the city. The single powerful blast, Iroh, breached the inner wall. Why couldn't he have done that, a couple years ago, a siege in the city? The order promptly advanced towards the wall to enter the city. Dozens of firebenders from atop the wall rained fire down at the invading army with no effect, and the order broke into Ba Sing Se. Heavy fighting took place at the main plaza of the lower ring, and the streets became littered with the broken down shells of the occupiers' Thunder tanks. The order advanced to the center of Ba Sing Se as the retreating army was encircled in hundreds of pockets throughout the city. Forgive me, but it seems that the White Lotus was a tad OP. Even against the Imperial Fire Nation firebenders, who were supposed to be stronger due to the comet, they were able to seemingly defeat them without breaking a sweat. I theorize that if Ozai instead started his scorched earth tactic near Ba Sing Se, his airship firebenders could act as a force multiplier and allow the Ba Sing Se garrison to gain crucial air support from more experienced and elite firebenders against the White Lotus, driving both the Aang gang and the White Lotus into dense urban fighting with enormous risks of fire damage and lost civilian life would force the protagonists of the show to fight more carefully and with restraint. Of course, Iroh could probably take on Ozai, but would be seen as a brother fighting another for control of the throne and not taken in a positive light. So, however it goes down, we have to assume that both the Aang gang and the White Lotus are defeated or neutralized. They can't pose a viable threat, else the Fire Nation cannot win the war. Maybe Aang doesn't enter the Avatar state and gets killed by Ozai. Not the most child-friendly outcome, but whatever. I could argue, even in OTL, that the Fire Nation was not fully defeated. Fire Nation citizens are raised to adore and fanatically be loyal to the state and the Fire Nation's imperialistic goals. Many of them had lost family members to the war. There wouldn't be many people who could remember a time before it. They've supported this system their whole lives. I can't see them just accepting a complete upheaval of it, the total loss of everything they fought so hard to accomplish, even in OTL. The oldest Fire Nation colonies are at least 112 years old. To put that into comparison, 112 years ago in our world was 1908. I don't think any of us would readily agree to revert to those sort of borders. So winning at Ba Sing Se would be a huge morale booster for the various Fire Nation garrisons scattered in the colonies and throughout occupied Earth Kingdom territory. So to review our point of divergence, Ozai has loosened up on tightening occupation to relieve some strain of partisan activity in already occupied territory, whilst also linking up with the Fire Nation garrison in Ba Sing Se during Sozan's comet to take on the gang and the White Lotus. By burning down a swath of the largest city in the world, he could presumably intimidate other lesser provinces of the Earth Kingdom into swearing fealty to him, lest they bring upon his wrath. If they don't break, he could always burn down resisting cities, with the morale of the Earth Kingdom faltering with each atrocity. In return, the Earth Kingdom people are able to live much as they did before, but they have to give him tribute or cheap labor or other forms of revenue. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, Azula does not become mentally deranged. Along with the Dai Li, either kills or imprisons Zuko and Katara. With de jure control of the Earth Kingdom, Ozai would now seek to consolidate his control of the entire world. This is harder than it looks. The Earth Kingdom is characterized by significant ethnic and cultural diversity, a consequence of the country's vast territorial expanse. As a result, it suffers from high levels of local autonomy and ethnic conflict, both of which began accelerating as the central government grew weak. Basically, de facto control rests largely with local leaders and cities. In general, the Earth Kingdom's bureaucracy had little influence upon the constituent towns and regions by the imperial government, especially outside of the major cities. Isolated regions like the Siwang Desert are havens for criminals, and many agricultural regions have little or no contact with officials from the central government. Ozai would have to acknowledge the facts on the ground, and he could just essentially force the leaders of local provinces and cities to pay him homage in the form of tribute or simple agreements of subservience. Like the British in India, Ozai could simply leave the existing systems of government in place to ease the transition to a Fire Nation subjugated Earth Kingdom. Actual enforcement of laws on the ground would only come much later, as the Fire Nation slowly pours loyal settlers into occupied territories. Perhaps they could claim to be a civilizing force, bringing their relatively advanced technology to help the dirt-poor commoners of the Earth Kingdom. Even though Ozai sounded like he was advocating mass genocide at that war meeting with the Zuka and Zula, if he were a pragmatist, he would have to understand that such a plan was both self-destructive and impractical. There was no way he could commit such a massive atrocity without crystallizing latent hopes of resistance and reigniting the war. Also, it would just create thoroughly devastated land with no infrastructure and no cheap and large labor pool to exploit. What about the water tribes? Frankly, the southern water tribe is a joke, a bunch of igloos and toddlers and old people. After a series of brutal Fire Nation raids during the war, the South Pole was left devastated. Nearly all of the surviving waterbenders had been taken prisoner. By 99 AG, the southern water tribe was on the brink of extinction. With its culture shattered, its main city largely abandoned, and its unique waterbending style effectively erased. So that tribe is a non-issue. The northern water tribe, however, had a thick wall of ice erected at the mouth of the city as a means to keep the Fire Nation out. The Siege of the North, which we see earlier in the show, the northern water tribe was nearly destroyed when Admiral Zhao led a massive naval assault on the place in an attempt to destroy the water tribes and kill the moon spirit, Tui, in an attempt to eradicate waterbending. The tribe was saved when Avatar Aang merged with the ocean spirit La, destroyed the Fire Navy fleet, and when Princess Yue gave up her life to revive Tui, thus becoming Tui's successor. Yeah, talk about Deus Ex Machina. Without literally supernatural intervention, the Fire Nation would have crushed the water tribes. In the aftermath of the Earth Kingdom's collapse, the water tribe would have to acknowledge that the Fire Nation now held de jure control over them and become subjects to the world government. So now, the entire world is at Ozai's fingertips. What would happen next? The rest of the world would have survived, but subservient. The Fire Nation's rhetoric was that they wanted to improve and modernize the world. This is similar rhetoric to many nations during the colonial period, especially the 19th century. In fact, I would say that the Fire Nation rhetoric is directly inspired by the Japanese Empire's idea of the co-prosperity sphere. This was an idea proposed by the Japanese government where the stated goal was that they would take control of East Asia in order to protect and improve it. But in reality, it was a chance to take resources from other regions to strengthen Japan. Of course, that led to other atrocities that I would not rather elaborate on here. I'm fairly certain that the world of Avatar would face a similar fate. The Earth Kingdom and Water Tribes would have their valuable resources funneled back to the Fire Nation Island or be held locally by a Fire Nation ruling class. What would they tell the future generations regarding Avatar and the rest of the extinct nations or benders? Official propaganda would likely be that other nations were dangerous and regrettably had to neutralize in terms of culture and sovereignty. There would probably be fake or exaggerated stories of crimes committed by the other nations, and they would probably say that the Fire Nation tried to save them, but that the other nations' warmonger nature led to famine that devastated their lands and cities. Essentially, the Fire Nation would shift blame and act as though they tried to help. For comparison to the other worlds, see a childhood games like Cowboys vs. Indians, where the indigenous people that were nearly wiped out are portrayed as the bad guys. Moreover, would they invent democracy? Most likely not. This is a complicated topic, but in my opinion, democracy in its modern form developed when weaponry evolved to the extent where relatively poor and untrained peasants could effectively fight against martial nobility. During the feudal era, knights were significantly more effective than anything a peasant rebellion could create. Knights trained for decades and had the best weapons and equipment available. This concentration of military power led to an inevitable concentration of political power. However, following the development of firearms, the peasant could be trained fairly quickly to be a substantial threat to knights, and mass armies of commoners became more effective than relatively small noble armies. This dispersal of military power led to the spread of political power. However, the Avatar world is different. Military power is genetic and seems to be slightly hereditary. The most effective armies are the ones with the most benders. Non-benders can be defeated in large numbers by individual benders. There are non-benders that are able to fight benders, but they tend to be the exception, not the norm, and require years of concentrated study. And even then, they can't compete against a sufficiently skilled bender. For instance, Sokka and Zuko are similarly skilled at sword fighting, but Zuko's additional firebending makes him significantly more dangerous. And despite Sokka being very skilled, he would have no chance of beating the Fire Lord Ozai. So there's the cap to the effectiveness of non-benders. Without a spreading of weaponry that can change the ruling bending class, I find it unlikely that political power will be given to the common person. There are some weapons in the Legend of Korra that start to head in that direction, but I don't think it's viable. The Equalist shock weapons and other hand weapons are effective to some extent, but they are only dangerous in the hands of the trained Equalist fighters. They were clearly well above the fighting skills of an average person. A common person given a shock glove wouldn't be much of a threat against a bender. And the Equalists were only successful at taking out skilled benders because they had one of the most powerful benders of all time secretly leading them. Furthermore, the more effective anti-bender weapons such as the mech suits are out of the reach of the common person. Those are state or corporate level weaponry. A normal person couldn't afford a mech suit. So rather than spread military power, the mech suits would only further concentrate power into the ruling class, which would further hinder democracy. Now, would their tech advance as fast as in our world in OTL? Well, probably not. Once the war was over, the major driving force of the Fire Nation's technological improvement would be gone. We actually don't see very much improvement in civilian technology in the Fire Nation. It seems like the Fire Nation citizens are living relatively similar lives to the other nation's citizens. This implies to me that all of the technological innovations have been focused onto the war effort. Once the war was over, the drive would be gone, and being an authoritarian government, I don't think the Fire Nation would be particularly concerned with improving the lives of the average person, and certain technologies would be counterproductive to the Fire Nation's goals. For instance, if they did invent radios, the only broadcast would probably be state propaganda. And another force that would slow technological progress would be the sudden influx of wealth from the conquest. If the ruling class of the Fire Nation was able to extract substantial wealth from the conquered lands, there would be not much of a need to worry about the happiness of the common person. Nations that have bountiful natural resources can often have significant portions of the population poor and uneducated. Without the need to foster a citizen-focused economy, the ruling class could just ignore the majority of the population. Also, wouldn't the Fire Nation Avatar be haunted by its past lives? Maybe, but in a Fire Nation ruled world, the Avatar line would almost certainly end. If an Avatar is killed in the Avatar state, the line ends. And it is unclear what would happen if there wasn't a member of the next nation available when the Spirit of Rava searched for a new host. For instance, if the Water Tribe was wiped out before Aang died, would it skip to a member of the Earth Kingdom, or would the line just end? No matter what though, the Avatar is either going to be killed or imprisoned. The Fire Nation wouldn't tolerate someone that could be a political symbol apart from the Fire Lord. As we already said, the Fire Nation could have wiped out the Water Tribes without the comet. The Southern Water Tribe was already effectively destroyed and they had no ability to offer resistance. The Northern Water Tribe was shattered following Zhao's siege, and even though they repelled the siege in our timeline, they would be unable to withstand another direct attack for many months, maybe even years depending on availability of supply lines. The Water Tribes would be effectively left for cleanup after the Earth Kingdom fell. I'm going to quote Niccolo Machiavelli right here. And here we must observe that men must either be flattered or crushed, for they will revenge themselves for slight wrongs, whilst for grave ones they cannot. The injury, therefore, that you do to a man should be such that you do not need to fear his revenge. Thanks for watching. Boy, that got dark for a kids show. I can understand now why the Fire Nation had to lose. Could you imagine Korra or the next Avatar getting slaughtered at like age 5 by some dark imposing Fire Nation soldiers? Yikes. Enough traumatizing imagery for one day. Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe for more great content. This is Scholar of the World, signing out.